This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and receive exclusive perks. Link in the description. Thomas and Friends ran for 24 seasons. And like every long-running show, Thomas was not immune to its inconsistencies across its run. Sometimes characters were written wrong. Sometimes characters disappeared completely. Sometimes they'd retcon something.
Henry wished he would never have to pull passengers ever again.
And then retcon their own retcon in the same season. But for all the changes made to the show over the years, Thomas has always been pretty consistent with its lore. At least from a grand overall big picture perspective. Especially when it came to the CGI series. The CGI era of Thomas, for all its faults, is loaded with callbacks and homages and flashbacks and recreations of the original source material. And who wouldn't love this kind of stuff? It's always fun seeing something that you're so familiar with reimagined in a new way. To me, it's so clear that the modern writers during the Brenner era especially really respected what came before, filling their material to the brim with winks to fans. I always thought it'd be fun to make a big video where I cover all of these callbacks, comparing these recreations with the originals, and explaining the differences. So, that's what we're going to do here today. Every callback in the CGI series of Thomas and Friends. This compilation will include everything that is a full-on flashback or an acknowledgement of a past episode. This list will not include little quotes or nods, like Thomas saying little engines can do big things in the Royal Engine. Or Diesel 10 calling Sydney Twinkle Toes.
Yeah, Twinkle Toes!
Yeah, these were written with Thomas and the Magic Railroad in mind, as little winks to fans, but they aren't really calling back or acknowledging a specific event. Or like how Daisy leaves the milk behind here, just like she did back in Season 2. Again, it's not really a callback to the events of her Season 2 episode. That's just her character doing a thing that she's done before. No, we are only covering flashbacks, recreations, or direct references to the old material. And trust me, there are a lot of them. Enough to fill up a nearly hour-long video. And just a heads up, this video was a nightmare to get approved by YouTube's copyright bots. It really had a problem letting any Adventure Begins footage go through. So in order to get this video up, all footage from that movie will sadly have to be cropped and pixelated, like this. I hate it just as much as you all do, but hey, that's YouTube for ya. Okay, let's get started, and we will go in order. We'll be starting this off with no other than Season 1, Episode 1, the series pilot, Thomas and Gordon. Now, the first 7 episodes of the series were all recreated and conjoined together to form one cohesive narrative for the 2015 70th anniversary movie, The Adventure Begins. So, naturally, these are the ones that will probably get the most focus here. The episode opens with that rather well-known description of Thomas's features.
He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome.
This description occurs in The Adventure Begins as well, when Thomas is first introduced, though the order is different.
The new engine had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy boiler, a short stumpy dome, and a short stumpy funnel.
In the original episode, Thomas sneaks up on Gordon while he's sleeping and wakes him up with his whistle.
Wake up, lazy bones, why don't you work hard like me?
In The Adventure Begins, he also does this.
Wake up, lazy bones! Why don't you work hard like me?
Although it occurs while he is still in his green LBSC paint job. Later on, Thomas has trouble waking up and is the last engine at the shed.
His driver and fireman couldn't make him start. His fire went out and there was not enough steam.
His fire went out and there wasn't enough steam.
At last, Thomas started. Oh dear, he yawned.
At last, Thomas started.
Oh dear, must get going.
In the original, this exchange happens in the yard beside the station.
Hurry up, you, said Gordon. Hurry yourself, replied Thomas.
In the recreation, it occurs while Thomas brings Gordon his coaches at the platform.
Hurry up, you!
Hurry up yourself.
Gordon purposely sets off early before Thomas can be uncoupled, and he takes the poor guy on the ride of his life as payback for teasing him.
Peep, peep, stop, stop! Hurry, 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 laughed Gordon.
Stop! Stop!
Hurry, hurry, hurry!
This is mostly the same in both versions. The recreation even adds this little moment of Edward witnessing everything
Edward! Thomas!
and stops in his tracks, dumbfounded. In both versions, the train finally comes to a stop at Willsworth.
Well, little Thomas, chuckled Gordon. Now you know what hard work means, don't you?
Well, little Thomas, now you know what hard work is like, don't you?
Thomas is uncoupled. In the original, he spins round on a turntable for his return journey, whereas in the recreation, he just pulls forward to a water tower. Both stories end with Thomas receiving a long drink.
He just puffed slowly away to rest and had a long, long drink.
Poor Thomas puffed slowly away to rest and had a long, long drink.
Moving on to Season 1, Episode 2, Edward and Gordon. In the original, the story takes place after Thomas has already arrived on Sodor and is in the shed with the others. In The Adventure Begins, this story is rewritten to be a sort of introduction to the characters before the movie starts, and takes place before Thomas arrives. Gordon is sent to pull a goods train.
A goods train, a goods train, a goods train, he grumbled. The shame of it, the shame of it, oh, the shame of it.
A goods train, the shame of it, oh, the shame of it.
In the original, Edward laughs when Gordon passes.
Edward laughed and went to find some more trucks.
In the recreation, he scolds him for complaining.
Oh, Gordon, it can't be that bad.
Yes, Edward, it is.
Gordon continues on, and the heavy train causes him to stick on the hill. This occurs off screen in the original episode, but we get to see it all go down in the recreation. In both versions, Gordon's driver calls him out on giving up.
His driver and fireman were talking to him severely. You're not trying. I can't do it, said Gordon. The noisy trucks hold an engine back so.
Come on, Gordon, you're not even trying.
I can't do it. Those noisy trucks hold an engine back.
In the original, a porter sends Edward to go push Gordon.
Gordon can't get up the hill, the porter called to Edward's driver. Will you take Edward and push him, please?
In the recreation, it's Sir Topham Hatt himself.
Yes, he can't get up the hill with his goods trucks, apparently.
Okay, sir, I'm on my way.
Edward arrives at the hill, and the two engines work hard to get the train up.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it, puffed Gordon. I will do it. I will do it. I will do it, puffed Edward.
I can't do it.
I will do it.
I can't do it.
I will do it.
Gordon reaches the top and continues on his way, leaving poor Edward behind.
I've done it. I've done it. I've done it, he said proudly.
I've done it. I've done it. I've done it. I knew I could do it.
In the original, Edward continues behind him and comes to a stop at Meron on the other side of the hill. In the recreation, he stops at the top of the hill and watches Gordon disappear.
Not even so much as a thank you.
Next up is Season 1, Episode 3, The Sad Story of Henry. The original episode takes place in real time, while in The Adventure Begins, the story is told to us as something that happened in the past, long before Thomas came to Sodor. In the original, Henry stops in the tunnel because he doesn't want to get his paint wet in the rain, for selfish reasons.
The rain will spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes, he said.
In the recreation, Henry is characterized differently and stops in the tunnel because he is literally afraid of the rain. In both versions, Sir Topham Hatt comes along and has the passengers try to pull Henry out with a rope.
Everyone pulled except the Fat Controller. Because, he said, my doctor has forbidden me to pull.
Everyone pulled,
Come on, everyone. Stop moving.
except the Fat Controller.
My doctor has forbidden me to pull.
And then he has them all try to push him out from the other end.
The Fat Controller said, 1, 2, 3, push! But he didn't help. My doctor has forbidden me to push, he said.
1, 2, 3, push! Everybody push! Harder! Come on! Put your backs into it! My doctor has also forbidden me to push.
When that fails, they bring an engine along. In the original, it's Thomas who comes along to push the train. In the recreation, the story takes place before Thomas is on Sodor, so it's James instead that comes along, still in his original black paint job. This may or may not be a sly nod to the original books, where a red engine very similar to James was the one to try to push the train out. All efforts fail, so Sir Topham Hatt gives up and walls Henry up in the tunnel.
We shall take away your rails, he said, and leave you here for always and always and always.
In The Adventure Begins, the story ends before we see it happen. But wait! We do get to see it! This episode was lucky enough to get 2 flashbacks in the series. In the 2012 movie Blue Mountain Mystery, Henry recalls the time he was bricked up in the tunnel, and we see the wall being built.
Sir Topham Hatt was really cross. So cross, in fact, he walled me up in the tunnel.
It should be noted that in both flashbacks, Henry is depicted in his new shape. In the original episode, Henry was in his old shape, before his rebuild. Henry being trapped in the tunnel with no steam left is also briefly mentioned by Rosie in the song Where in the World is Thomas? From the 2018 movie Big World, Big Adventures.
He could be stuck inside a tunnel with no steam to move at all.
Next up is Season 1, Episode 4, Edward, Gordon, and Henry. Now, there is no flashback to this episode, but the events are mentioned by Edward.
The Fat Controller let him out eventually, after Gordon burst his safety valve and couldn't pull the express.
All right.
He's rudely cut off by Gordon before we can hear any more. Moving on to Season 1, Episode 5, Thomas's Train. In the original episode, Thomas wishes to pull a train of his very own instead of always being stuck in the yard shunting. One morning, Henry can't build up steam.
One night, he and Henry were alone. Henry was ill. The men worked hard, but he didn't get better.
One morning, Henry wasn't feeling well.
This occurs in both versions. In the original, Thomas wonders to himself if this will be his chance to pull his train.
If Henry is ill, he thought, perhaps I shall pull his train.
In the recreation, he shares this thought with Edward as he passes him.
If Henry doesn't come, I might get to pull his train.
In the original, the coaches Thomas collects are the green and cream bogie coaches, while in the recreation, he collects the smaller red four-wheel coaches. In both versions, Thomas waits and waits for Henry to arrive.
Thomas waited and waited, and still Henry didn't come.
Thomas waited and waited, but still Henry didn't come.
Sir Topham Hatt orders for another engine,
Find another engine, he ordered.
You'll have to find another engine.
to which the station master tells him,
There's only Thomas, they said.
There's only Thomas, sir.
You'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now.
You'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now.
Yes, sir.
In the original, it's Thomas's driver that warns him not to be impatient.
Don't be impatient, said his driver. Wait till everything is ready.
In the recreation, it's Sir Topham Hatt.
Don't be impatient now, Thomas. Wait until everything is ready.
In the original, it's ambiguous how the mishap occurs.
What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train. Or perhaps the driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started.
In The Adventure Begins, Thomas sets off too early when he hears a guard's whistle blow for Edward's train.
Thomas heard the guard's whistle, so he took off.
And leaves before he can be coupled up. In both versions, Thomas travels a significant distance without his train. The Adventure Begins even adds this little moment of him passing a rather confused James.
Can't you see I'm pulling coaches, James?
In both versions, Thomas is stopped by a red signal near a signal box.
Bother, he thought. I must stop, and I was going so nicely too. What a nuisance signals are.
Bother. That red signal means danger. I have to stop. What a nuisance signals are.
And it is the signalman that informs him that he isn't pulling anything.
Hello, Thomas, he said. What are you doing here? I'm pulling a train, said Thomas. Can't you see? Where are your coaches, then? Thomas looked back. Why, bless me, he said, if we haven't left them behind.
Hello, Thomas. What are you doing here?
I'm pulling my very first passenger train. Can't you see?
Then where are your coaches?
Oh, no!
Thomas goes back to the station in shame. Back at the station, all the passengers turn on Sir Topham Hatt.
At the station, all the passengers were talking at once. They were telling the Fat Controller what a bad railway it was.
Back at the station, the passengers were all talking at once, telling the Fat Controller what a bad railway it was.
The Adventure Begins also adds this little moment of Thomas apologizing to Topham.
I'm sorry, sir. I really am.
Thomas is coupled up, and he successfully pulls the train. Now very late. In the original, the engines are seen teasing Thomas long after the event.
But for a long time afterwards, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said, "Look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull a train, but forgot about the coaches."
In The Adventure Begins, they laugh at him that night in the sheds. Moving on to Season 1, Episode 6, Thomas and the Trucks. In both versions, a kind Edward offers to switch jobs with Thomas for a day, one night at the sheds.
I've got some trucks to take home tomorrow. If you take them instead of me, I'll push coaches in the yard. Thank you, said Thomas. That will be nice.
Don't be sad, Thomas. If you really want to go out, why don't you take my goods train tomorrow? I can take over in the yard if you like.
Really?
In the morning, Thomas races off from the shed to find the trucks, and we get this little montage of him sorting them out. In The Adventure Begins, Edward goes with Thomas to the yard. He continually warns Thomas to be careful, but Thomas pays no notice.
It's not the same as in the yard. They'll push you off the rails if you're not careful.
Don't be silly.
In the original, Thomas pulls the trucks along the line to the jaunty, jazzy version of the Thomas theme. In The Adventure Begins, the journey is all a part of a musical sequence, played to a cover of the song Troublesome Trucks.
Thomas pulls the trucks along the line. He's happy and he thinks it's going fine.
Thomas loses control on the hill, and the trucks push him down.
No, 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 answered the trucks, bumping into each other. Go on, go on. Before the driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind him.
Because those trucks and trucks will get the engines every time.
The Adventure Begins adds a moment of Thomas racing past a distressed Henry, which only seems to add to his worries. In both versions, the runaway train finally comes to a stop at Meron, inches away from the buffers. The Meron in the original episode is the Season 1 depiction of Meron, while the Adventure Begins one is the Season 6 onwards version of Meron. Sir Topham Hatt is at the station and witnesses everything. In the original, he tells Thomas that only after learning how to properly shunt trucks around can he become really useful.
You've got a lot to learn about trucks then, little Thomas. After pushing them about here for a few weeks, you'll know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine.
In The Adventure Begins, the exchange is a little different. Sir Topham Hatt threatens to keep Thomas in his shed if he doesn't learn to be patient, and Thomas tells him that he wants to be really useful.
You've a lot to learn about trucks, little Thomas. If you're not prepared to be patient and learn how to do things properly, I'll have to keep you in the shed.
No, sir. I want to be a really useful engine.
The original episode ends there, but The Adventure Begins adds this little bit after of Sir Topham Hatt scolding Edward too. Nice addition there. The events of this episode are also mentioned by Thomas in Season 23, Episode 2, Chucklesome Trucks, where footage from The Adventure Begins is reused.
I almost came off the rails!
Moving on to Season 1, Episode 7, Thomas and the Breakdown Train, the final episode recreated for The Adventure Begins. In both versions, Thomas is shown still working as a shunter at the big yard. In the original, Sir Topham Hatt is shown encouraging Thomas to learn.
Remember, don't be impatient, Thomas. You can never be as strong and fast as Gordon, but you can be a really useful engine.
In The Adventure Begins, it's Edward that takes on the role of Thomas's mentor and shows him how to shunt.
I'm getting on okay now, aren't I?
Of course you are. I think you nearly know as much about trucks as I do now.
In the original, Thomas comes across the breakdown train in a shed besides Tidmouth Sheds.
There was also a small coach and two strange things his driver called cranes.
In The Adventure Begins, he stumbles across the breakdown train, now depicted as characters Judy and Jerome, in the yard at Knapford.
Judy!
Jerome?
Emergency!
Where's the accident?
Is an engine off the rails?
In the original, it's Thomas's driver who explains to him what the cranes are for.
That's the breakdown train, he told Thomas. The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and trucks.
In The Adventure Begins, it's Annie and Clarabelle who tell him this.
That's the breakdown train.
Don't they ever go anywhere?
Only in emergencies.
One day, a runaway James comes racing through the yard. His brakes have caught fire and the trucks are pushing him.
Help! Help! They're pushing me, he panted. On, laughed the trucks.
Help! They're pushing me! They're pushing me!
In the original, Thomas spots him as he races past Tidmouth Sheds. In The Adventure Begins, he passes him and Edward at Knapford. In the original version, James is already in his red paint. In The Adventure Begins, he is painted in his original black livery, staying more true to the original source material. In the original, James's crash occurs off-screen. Thomas catches wind of James's accident later on, and sets off to the rescue with the breakdown train.
James is off the line! The breakdown train! Quickly! Thomas was coupled on, and off they went.
The Adventure Begins plays out wildly different. Thomas sets chase after James and tries to stop him, in what is a very exciting chase sequence.
Couple me up! I need to slow James down!
Right.
He fails to do so, of course, and James comes off the line at the curve. The crash is shown on screen this time in its full glory, his poor face scraping the ground and all. Thomas races back to collect the breakdown train. In both versions, the cranes are shown lifting James back onto the rails.
At last, James was lifted safely onto the track.
In the original, Thomas tows James back to the sheds, where Sir Topham Hatt meets them and praises Thomas on a job well done.
Well, Thomas, he said, I've heard all about it and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine.
In The Adventure Begins, Sir Topham Hatt arrives at the crash site aboard Edward and praises Thomas there.
Well done, Thomas. Now, I'd like you to take James to the steamworks.
And from there, Thomas takes James to the works. In the original, Sir Topham Hatt praising Thomas and granting him his branch line occur in the same scene.
James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and you shall have a branch line all to yourself. Oh, thank you, sir, said Thomas.
In The Adventure Begins, they are split up. Sir Topham Hatt comes to see Thomas that night in the shed, and grants him his branch line in front of everyone.
James shall have new brakes, a bit of repair here and there, and you, Thomas, you have shown yourself worthy of having your own branch line.
My own branch line?
But who will fetch our coaches for us, sir?
Much to Gordon's dismay. James's runaway is also shown in Season 21, Episode 17, The Fastest Red Engine on Sodor, when Thomas reminds him of the last time his brakes failed.
Don't forget that time your wooden brake blocks caught fire.
Oh.
And on to the next episode, Season 1, Episode 8, James and the Coaches. In the original, James returns home from the works off-screen. He returns home at the end of The Adventure Begins, now sporting his brand new red paint job.
James, is that really you?
Of course it is.
After he causes trouble, Sir Topham Hatt threatens to take his red paint away and have him painted blue.
If you can't behave, I shall take away your red coat and have you painted blue. James didn't like that at all.
This exchange is mentioned in Season 22, Episode 13, An Engine of Many Colors.
A long time ago, Sir Topham Hatt said that if I misbehaved again, he would paint me blue.
James even has a dream that night where he is shown in blue paint. And to be honest, it doesn't look half bad on him.
Nobody thinks blue engines are splendid. Ugh.
Skipping a few ahead now, our next callback is to Season 1, Episode 13, Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow. In the original episode, Thomas meets Terrence the tractor and remarks at how strange his caterpillar tracks are.
Hello, said the tractor. I'm Terrence. I'm plowing. I'm Thomas. I'm pulling a train. What ugly wheels you've got.
This episode is retold in a flashback in Season 21, Episode 3, Terrence Breaks the Ice, where this exchange is shown.
Hello, I'm Terrence. I'm plowing.
I'm Thomas. I'm pulling a train. Oh, what ugly wheels you've got.
Terrence even shows to Thomas now just what he can do with wheels that let him go anywhere.
I can go anywhere. I don't need rails. I don't want to go anywhere, said Thomas. I like my rails, thank you.
I can go anywhere. I don't need rails. See?
I don't want to go anywhere. I like my rails.
Winter comes and Thomas refuses to wear his snowplow. In the original, Thomas boasts to himself that he doesn't need it, and that the snow is silly soft stuff.
Silly soft stuff, puffed Thomas. I didn't need that stupid old thing yesterday, and I shan't today. Snow can't stop me.
In the recreation, he says this in response to Annie and Clarabelle warning him.
Thomas, maybe you should go back for your snowplow.
Just to be safe.
I don't need that heavy, uncomfortable plow. Snow is silly, soft stuff. It won't stop me.
Thomas races into a tunnel and crashes into a snowdrift on the other side.
Cinders and ashes, said Thomas. I'm stuck.
Cinders and ashes? Oh, I'm stuck.
Try as he might, Thomas is unable to unstick himself.
Oh, my wheels and coupling rods. I shall have to stop here till I'm frozen. What a silly engine I am.
I'll have to stay here till I'm frozen solid. Oh, what a silly engine I am.
Luckily for him, Terrence arrives to pull him free. In the original, he pulls Annie and Clarabelle away first, and then comes back for Thomas. In the recreation, he pulls the whole trio out at once.
Thank you, Terrence. Your caterpillars are splendid, said Thomas.
Thank you, Terrence. I have to admit, your caterpillar tracks are splendid, and I'll never call them ugly again.
Skipping further ahead now, our next callback is to Season 1, Episode 19, The Flying Kipper. In this episode, Henry has his famous crash while pulling the Flying Kipper, and he is so damaged that Sir Topham Hatt sends him to Crewe to be rebuilt.
I'm sending you to Crewe, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. You'll feel a different engine and won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice?
In Season 24, Episode 23, Thomas and the Royal Engine, Thomas, while somewhere in England, wonders if where he is Crewe, where Henry was once sent.
Perhaps this is Crewe, where Henry went to be repaired.
And on to Season 1, Episode 23, Dirty Objects. In this episode, James loses control of his trucks on the hill. They push him down, and he runs away. Through Marin Station he goes, and collides with a train of tar tankers. Thomas recalls this incident in Season 23, Episode 2, Chucklesome Trucks.
Let's not forget the time you let the troublesome trucks run away with you, James.
They pretty faithfully tried to recreate the shot of James racing through Maron, and even created new tankers with the original TAR logos on them. That's pretty neat. And our final callback to Season 1 is Season 1, Episode 25, Down the Mine. In this episode, Thomas pushes his luck by purposefully going past a danger sign at the old lead mine. This proves disastrous, as the ground below him gives way, and he falls down into an old mine shaft.
Fire and smoke, said Thomas. I am sunk.
In the 2012 movie Blue Mountain Mystery, Thomas recalls this as one of the worst things he's ever done.
Do you remember the day I was shunting cars at the mine? I knew that I shouldn't chuff past the danger sign, but I wanted to see what would happen if I did. I steamed right past it and fell down into the mine.
He falls into the mine and is even shown trying to back himself out, to no avail. As well as being shown in a flashback, this event is mentioned many times. It is first mentioned by James in the 2017 movie Journey Beyond Sodor, as one of the many silly incidents Thomas has gotten into over the years.
Oh, knowing Thomas, he probably got lost on the mainland, or fell down a mine, or...
Diesel also briefly mentions this event in the Where in the World is Thomas musical number in Big World, Big Adventures.
Or drop down into a mine!
It's also later mentioned in Season 23, Episode 18, Deep Trouble, when Thomas brings Jack and Alfie to the old mine. Alfie asks why they can't go closer, to which Thomas says,
Sorry, but I can't. The last time I was here, I fell into a mine shaft. I'm still not sure if the ground is strong enough.
Jack and Alfie apparently remember this, because in the double-length episode Mines of Mystery from the same season, Jack brings it up as a funny story about Thomas.
Well, one time at the old mines, Thomas decided to pass a danger sign and ended up causing all sorts of confusion and delay.
Much to Thomas's embarrassment. Thomas just can't escape this one, can he? And that concludes all the callbacks to Season 1. Quite a lot of callbacks here. The other seasons won't be as chunky as this one, sadly. So let's move on to Season 2, with our first episode being Season 2, Episode 9, Percy and Harold. In this episode, Percy meets Harold the helicopter for the first time. Harold is rude and calls railways slow.
I think railways are slow. They're not much use and quite out of date. That Harold, that stuck-up whirlybird thing, says I'm slow and out of date. Just let him wait. I'll show him.
So when Percy spots Harold flying home one day, he decides to race him, and wins. This event is recalled in Season 20, Episode 2, Letters to Santa, as the narrator tells us the origins of Percy and Harold's beef with each other, alongside a beautifully animated flashback.
Slow and out of date, eh? I'll show him. Hurry, hurry, hurry!
Every shot here is framed just like the illustrations from the original book. Quite the homage. Moving on to Season 2, Episode 11, Percy Takes the Plunge. In this one, Percy, much like Thomas in Down the Mine, wants to see what happens if he dares to go past a danger sign at the docks. He tells the trucks to push him past it, and they do. He toboggans off the rails and into the sea.
Percy was sunk.
Not his finest moment. This event is first briefly mentioned in the 2014 movie Tale of the Brave, when Percy is hesitant to pass a danger sign.
Percy stopped at the danger signs. He had had trouble with going past danger signs before.
Percy also mentions this incident in the Where in the World is Thomas song.
Who rolled into the ocean because he passed a danger sign?
The event is later shown in a full flashback in Season 23, Episode 2, Chucklesome Trucks.
How about the time the troublesome trucks pushed Percy into the sea?
The trucks hurl Percy past the danger sign, and he slides down the ramp into the sea. In the original, the tracks Percy slides down are old rails on a collapsed quay, hence the danger sign. while the recreation shows this happening on the rails to the train ferry launch at Brendam Docks. Also, for some reason, Cranky and Carly are there. Moving on to Season 2, Episode 16, Brake Van. In this one, Donald, while reversing, can't stop on slippery rails and crashes tender-first into a signal box. This event is mentioned in Season 21, Episode 7, Emily in the Middle, as one of the many embarrassing stories about Donald that Douglas tells Emily about.
And that's when Donald reversed into the signal box.
Our final callback to Season 2 is Season 2, Episode 18, Thomas Comes to Breakfast. A rather well-known episode where Thomas, while foolishly trying to drive himself, can't stop and crashes into the station master's house.
Horrors! Cried Thomas, and shut his eyes. The house rocked. Broken glass tinkled. Plaster was everywhere.
This is first recalled in the 2017 movie Journey Beyond Sodor, as one of Thomas's many silly incidents that James lists off.
Or crashed into a station master's house. What?
It's also briefly recreated in the Where in the World is Thomas musical number of Big World, Big Adventures.
Crash into a station master's house. Right through a wall.
And that concludes Season 2. On to Season 3. Our first Season 3 callback is in Season 3, Episode 1, A Scarf for Percy. In this one, Percy tries to sneak up on the coaches quietly. Some porters don't hear him, and he collides with a luggage trolley on his line, getting covered in sticky jam and trousers.
Worst of all, a pair of trousers coil lovingly round his funnel.
In Blue Mountain Mystery, Percy recalls this as one of the worst things he's ever done, and the event is shown to us in a flashback.
Baggage, clothes, and sticky jam flew up into the air and fell over me and Sir Topham Hatt.
In the original, this seems to appear in the big yard beside Knapford. In the flashback, this occurs at Wellsworth. Moving on to Season 3, Episode 7, Thomas, Percy, and the Dragon. In this one, Thomas transports a giant paper dragon on his flatbed. He passes Percy in the night, and the poor green engine is spooked by the dragon.
Help! Cried Percy. I'm not going to open my eyes until my driver comes.
Thomas recalls this in Season 23, Episode 14, Wish You Were Here. During his time in China, Thomas sees a dragon on a flatbed and remembers the time that Percy was scared of one.
Percy would have been scared, though. Once on Sodor, he thought dragons really existed because he saw a dragon. Whoa!
Next up is the very next episode, Season 3, Episode 8, Diesel Does It Again. This episode features Diesel's first big return to Sodor, and he causes some trouble at the docks. Thinking he can get away with his bad behavior, he carelessly pushes some trucks too far, and they fall into the sea.
He banged the trucks hard into the buffers, but the buffers weren't secure. The silly trucks were sunk.
This event is called back in the show's A Christmas Carol adaptation, Season 19, Episode 11, Diesel's Ghostly Christmas, specifically Part 1. Salty, posing as the ghost of Christmas past, reminds Diesel of this, as one of the many times Diesel was deliberately not helpful.
You weren't helpful that time you pushed those cars into the sea, were you?
In the original, the crash occurs on a jetty with rails on it. In the recreation, Diesel hurls them through the buffers off the main dock. Next up is one of my favorite episodes, Season 3, Episode 21, Escape. This is the rather well-known episode where Douglas comes across Oliver and Toad trying to escape from the scrapyard to Sodor.
But what are you doing? Escaping? From what? Scrap?
And he assists them on the last leg of their journey. Oliver's origins here is mentioned in Season 18, Episode 6, Toad's Adventure, as one of the many, many times Oliver brags about his daring escape to Toad.
And then there was that night of my daring escape from the scrapyard. Oh, what an adventure that was!
Oh no, Mr. Oliver, I was there too, remember?
The moon was full that night, and the wind was rustling in the trees. I weren't scared, though.
Interestingly, he does not mention Douglas's involvement whatsoever, but maybe we can chalk that up to Oliver just being boastful and exaggerating.
Oh, yes. My escape from that scrapyard was probably the greatest escape anyone's ever had.
Our last Season 3 stop is Season 3, Episode 23, Bulgy. Bulgy, the double-decker bus, comes to Sodor, and after his not-so-successful attempt at taking a shortcut to beat the steam engines, is retired from service and turned into a henhouse.
He's a henhouse now, and his lies can do no harm. The hens never listen to them anyway.
Bulgy makes his grand return to the roads in Season 21, Episode 15, Unscheduled Stops. Thomas, shocked to see him, remarks,
Bulgy? But I thought you'd been turned into a hen house.
Oh, only for a while.
This is a little strange of Thomas to say, as Bulgy previously returned to the roads in Season 7's Bulgy Rides Again, and Thomas very clearly knew about that.
Bulgy, exclaimed Thomas, what are you doing here?
I'm being repaired. I'm going back on the road.
And we're on to Season 4, Episode 20, Paint Pots and Queens. In this episode, the engines all prepare for the arrival of Queen Elizabeth II. Gordon pulls the royal train and brings Her Majesty to Sodor. This one is referenced rather frequently. In Season 18, Episode 21, Emily Saves the World, Emily asks Gordon if he's ever carried anyone famous on his express.
And even the Queen.
Oh my, the Queen? That would be exciting.
In Season 24, Episode 23, Thomas and the Royal Engine, Sir Topham Hatt receives a letter in the post from the Queen. The engines respond with excitement, and all remember the first time that she came to see them.
Is she coming to see us again?
Who will be pulling her train?
The Queen's arrival was recreated for an online short in a series about each of the Steam Team members. In Gordon's short, Thomas recalls the time Gordon brought the Queen to Sodor.
And was once given a special job pulling a special passenger. The Queen of England!
A few visual differences here. In the original, the station was decked out with flags and all the engines were there for the occasion. In the recreation, the station is not decorated, and it seems only Edward and Percy are there. Our next callback is Season 4, Episode 21, Thomas and the Special Letter. In this one, all the main engines on the railway parade off to England.
Look out, big city, here we come. And the cavalcade puffed away.
The engines are all lined up in a big roundhouse where children from all over the country can come and see them. In the 2016 movie, The Great Race, Thomas tells Flying Scotsman about this.
And once, a long time ago, I went back across with the other famous engines from Sodor.
Is that so? I didn't think there were famous engines on Sodor.
Thomas's crash through the buffers in this episode is also briefly mentioned by Gordon in Where in the World is Thomas?
He could have bashed into some buffers.
This is pretty iffy though. I'm not sure if this is a direct reference to this crash, as Thomas has bashed through buffers a number of times. But whatever, we'll count it. And our next callback is Season 4, Episode 22, Bullseyes. In this one, Daisy tries to confront a bull on her line.
Champion sniffed at Daisy.
Oof!
Said Daisy, and that was that.
Only to be scared away by it. Her trouble with bulls on the tracks has never gone forgotten, as she just can't seem to get away from them. Season 20, Episode 10, Ryan and Daisy. Season 20, Episode 15, The Missing Breakdown Train. And Season 24, Episode 7, Nia and the Unfriendly Elephant, all show moments of Daisy coming to trouble with a bull on her tracks. I'll call myself out here for bending my own rules for this one. I think calling these callbacks is a total stretch. They're more a running gag, more so than a callback. But it felt kind of weird to not at least acknowledge them, since they occur so often, so I included them. And that concludes Season 4. Season 5 surprisingly has no callbacks to it, besides Sir Topham Hatt saying that one line in the Royal Engine.
I'm afraid our fireman's been taken ill. Then I'll be your fireman, sighed the Fat Controller.
Then I shall be your fireman.
But that's not really an acknowledgement of that episode's events, just a little wink wink for the fans. So, let's move on to Season 6. Our first Season 6 callback is to Season 6, Episode 1, Salty's Secret. This episode features the debut of Salty and his origin story. When he first arrived on Sodor, he was sent to work at the quarry.
A quarry? He cried. There must be some mistake. I'm a dockyard diesel.
Much to his dismay. But after proving his worth, Sir Topham Hatt promoted him to work at Brendam Docks.
That docks, Salty exclaimed. The docks are hard by the sea. Oh, thank you, sir, he said.
Season 17, Episode 10, Away from the Sea, features a recap of this episode, showing a flashback to Salty working at the quarry.
Oh, I'm a dockside diesel, Mavis. I need to be by the sea.
They even pretty faithfully recreated this shot of the engines at the shed, but strangely replaced Mavis with Diesel. I'm assuming that was a goof on the animator's part. Moving on now to Season 6, Episode 10, Twin Trouble. In this one, Donald and Douglas collide with Trevor's hay cart stuck on the line.
Luckily, no one was hurt.
They blame each other for the accident.
You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart, huffed Donald. You pulled me, you mean, argued Douglas. Didn't he? Did.
And fall out as a result. This little mishap is brought up in Season 21's Emily in the Middle, as another embarrassing story about Donald that Douglas tells Emily.
He tried to make out that it was me who pushed him. I said, you pulled me, more like. He was proper sulky all day.
Really?
And our last callback to Season 6 is Season 6, Episode 22, Thomas the Jet Engine. This is the ever-famous episode where Thomas collects a jet engine from the docks. The engine accidentally gets switched on, and it rockets Thomas across Sodor at wicked fast speed.
Want a race, Thomas? Beat Bertie? Never mind.
In Season 18's Emily Saves the World, Thomas recalls this as one of the many exciting deliveries that he's collected over the years.
Once, I delivered a jet engine. It started up and it went flying across Sodor at supersonic speed.
Moving on to Season 7 now, we get our first callback to Season 7, Episode 8, Bulgy Rides Again. This episode featured Bulgy's first big return to the roads. But after an incident with some chickens, he decided that he was done with passengers and took up life as a mobile vegetable stand.
Bulgy likes carrying vegetables. They don't lay eggs, and they never complain.
In Bulgy's second return to the roads in Season 21's Unscheduled Stops, Thomas recalls Bulgy being turned into a henhouse, to which Bulgy retorts,
"Oh, only for a while. Then I was a mobile vegetable stand, and now I'm back in service."
Guess he got tired of carrying vegetables. Moving on, we come to Season 7, Episode 23, The Runaway Elephant. In this episode, Duncan transports an elephant statue to a new station on the line. In Season 18's Emily Saves the World, he boasts about this special delivery to Rheneas.
I have had some pretty exciting deliveries in my day, but the most exciting was probably a big elephant statue.
Moving on to Season 8 now, and I could only find one callback to this season, and it is to Season 8, Episode 13, Percy and the Magic Carpet. In this one, a flower show is happening at Maithwaite, and Alicia Bhatti, the famous opera singer, is to be there to open it. Gordon brings her there aboard his special train. Gordon recalls this event in, you guessed it, Emily Saves the World, as one of the many famous people he's had aboard his express.
Well, I've carried an opera singer on my express.
I couldn't find any more callbacks to Season 8, so if there is one that I missed, comment it below. We still have one more callback to the model series, and this one is to Season 9. Season 9, Episode 12, Rheneas and the Dinosaur. In this episode, Rheneas transports a dinosaur skeleton aboard a flatbed. He recalls this in response to Duncan's boasting in, wait for it, Emily saves the world.
Really? Well, once I had to deliver a great big dinosaur skeleton.
Wow, an elephant and a dinosaur.
And that's it for callbacks to the model series. But I still have one more that I'd like to shout out. And that's to Book 12 of the Railway series, specifically to the story, Gordon Goes Foreign. In this story, Gordon gets into an argument with an engine from England about what the name of London Station is. Gordon says it's King's Cross, but the visiting engine insists it's Euston. Duck chimes in and says it's Paddington.
I'm sure it's King's Cross. I'll go and prove it. But that was easier said than done.
After finally reaching London, Gordon discovers that the station is actually called St. Pancras.
London's all wrong. They've changed it. It isn't King's Cross anymore. It's St. Pancras.
This is all one big in-joke to London having several railway stations, all with different names. But the engines didn't know this, as they all each ever only use the one station on their respective lines. This story was considered to be adapted into the TV series in Season 2, but was ultimately cut for budgetary restraints. Regardless, the story still gets a callback in the series finale, Thomas and the Royal Engine. Gordon boasts that he's been to London before.
I know the way to London after all, and have been there before, you know. Not the station names again, Gordon. I just wish they would make up their minds on what to call London Station.
And with that, I'm going to cut it there. Because beyond this, we start to get into the CGI series referencing itself. There are plenty of CGI episodes that are referenced in later stuff, like how Season 19's Helping Hero has a full-on flashback to Hero of the Rails. But I don't want to get into all those, because the closer we get to the end, the more pointless this video gets. If there are any callbacks that I missed here, please post them in the comments below. I'm sure there's some offhand reference to a hit episode that I just totally forgot about. Going into this video, I did not think there would be so many callbacks to the old show that it'd take nearly an hour to cover them all. I thought 30 minutes, maybe, but hot damn, there's way more than I thought. God, I miss this era of the show. I still remember how exhilarating The Adventure Begins was when it first came out. If only we could turn back time. Just a quick update here. In the previous video, I talked about a multi-video tugs project I'm working on for the Lucky Tug channel. I said I was aiming to get this out for the first week of December, but I don't think that's going to be doable. There's a lot of little edits here and there I still have to make, and I'd rather delay the project than rush it out and be unhappy with it. It is still in the works, and I'm trying to find time to work on it while also doing my main channel stuff. Right now, I'm still hoping for a December release, but it'll probably be towards the end of the month now. I'll keep you all updated. And that's about it from me. Thanks again to all my patrons for your continued support. You all are what keep my channel going. For those who celebrate it, I hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving. And I will see you all in the next one.